So you're gonna play something or?
No,
Okay.
we're live.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, so we just go, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, I guess we should start with the fact that I'm not Matt Farah.
Yeah.
I don't look like
so
him.
this is the episode we just
Yes.
started. You gotta give me some warning.
Well, I mean, I'm one of those guys that just like dives in, feet first, ready to go. Both feet.
All right.
So yeah,
welcome back to the Watch and Listen podcast.
The Watch and Listen podcast. Okay, great. So we're off and running. Great. So Cameron, you are a familiar face. I'm clearly not a familiar face. So do you want to let people know as to kind of what we're doing here, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, same as always. We've got watches, and hopefully you're going to watch and listen to this show.
Podcast.
But now it's myself, Cameron Weiss from Weiss Watch Co, and my friend here, Michael Senderovich.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. We go a little ways back. Like, how long have we known each other? Like 3 years?
Yeah, it's been a while, and same thing, cars and watches.
Right. This would be the third podcast I'd be doing with you.
That's right.
Right. So we had On Time, which we won't talk about because that was a watch podcast, and now it's all about the Watch and Listen podcast. There was Road Stories, which is a car podcast, which doesn't really work, obviously, because it's not a watch podcast. And now the Watch and Listen podcast.
And actually, I guess it would be the fourth because you were on Watch and Listen last year.
Was I? Yes, I was on Watch and Listen last year. There you go. So I guess I'm kind of sort of familiar with, or at least I should be.
Yeah, that's right. You brought the, that was for our independent watchmaking episode,
right.
And you brought along a pretty nice watch.
I did. It was lent to me by my very good friend Mike Margolis, who, well, hopefully will bring onto this show because he's got some stories. He worked very closely with Jean-Claude Biver, and he is now the distributor for quite a lot of different watches, including Chopik, H. Moser, some other stuff. I should know this, but I don't. And I'll apologize. I will share this in another episode when Mike's actually here. I'll do some research on it. But anyway, so this first episode, what we wanted to do was to just share kind of what we have going on in our collections, what we like, what we don't like, and have kind of an introduction to both of our tastes, right?
Yeah. I think people will want to see your watches, and also I have a few things I added to my collection since the last time I was showing it last year on Watch and Listen.
Very nice. Okay, so should we just go for it?
Yeah, hop in.
Okay.
What do you got over there?
You want to start with me?
Yeah, let's unless you want to check out some of my watches.
Okay. Well, let's do you first because you're the familiar face. And you have quite a distinctive collection here. And you actually have a collection. I'm not much of a collector, actually. I brought a few watches that don't belong to me. So we'll start with those after. So let's start with what you got.
So one of my favorite watches right now is actually the new ultralight that we just came out with.
Cool.
One of the watches that I made. It's something I wanted to make for a very long time, and it actually has a movement that is made of aluminum.
Okay.
Which is why it's ultralight.
All right. Well, let's take a look at it. So there it is. Very nice blue dial.
Yeah. This is it's like a navy blue dial. It's
I
just,
was going to say that.
If you get the blue right, it's really nice. I absolutely love it. Titanium case as well, so the titanium is a little bit darker than stainless steel, which pairs nice with the blue. But again, really a lot happening in the back.
Right, where the magic is.
Exactly. Black. It's black anodized aluminum.
Right.
Which is really rare in a watch movement. You won't find aluminum in another watch movement, at least not easily. You can look for it, and they're out there, but not like this.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. Traditionally, watch movements, the bridges, for the most part, everything else too, is made out of brass, right?
Yeah, traditionally you're going to have brass bridges.
Okay.
And then you're going to have some steel parts.
Okay.
And sapphire jewels. A couple of other alloys for the springs, but mainly it's going to be brass, which is quite a bit heavier than aluminum. So to make all of the bridges out of aluminum, and actually not just any aluminum, we're actually using 7075 aluminum,
okay,
which is a high-strength aluminum alloy, and then we're coating it black. So it has a different look. You wouldn't think aluminum immediately if you look at it, but we were able to shave off just over 30 grams from the standard issue field watch that's stainless with a brass movement, going to the titanium case and then the aluminum bridges on the movement.
Right.
So Pretty
30
substantial.
30 grams doesn't sound like a lot, but when you take a watch that's 30 grams more and put it on your wrist after you've worn this watch, it feels like a lot.
Yeah. It's substantial on the wrist.
All right, so why did you do this? Why did you all of a sudden decide to make this watch?
I wanted to make an ultralight watch for a long time, since we started, really. And I had heard about this watch that Rado had made, and it was an aluminum movement.
Okay.
But it was your typical aluminum alloy, which is 6061. And I thought, we're in the aerospace capital of the world here.
Yeah.
So why not use some aerospace
Right.
materials?
The South Bay. Who's here? Northrop Grumman. Northrop Grumman. Wow, that's a tongue twister.
Everyone has an office here. Everyone has an office. Like Boeing is right over in El Segundo, that really technically is the aerospace capital of the world.
Right.
However, if I walk right outside our building, I can look down the street and see SpaceX.
Right.
They have one of the spaceships right there sticking up outside their facility.
Yep.
You can see it from our workshop.
Yep.
So
It's very cool.
there's a lot of aerospace inspiration in my brand and the watches to begin with. So we used grade 5 titanium and then the 7075 aluminum, which both are alloys that you'll find in airplanes and space shuttles.
Okay. All right. So very high tech.
Yeah. So
Very,
that's
very high
what
tech.
I've been wearing a lot lately. And it's new to my collection.
Okay. Sounds good. Should we go on to the next one, or do you want to talk more about this one?
No, I mean, that pretty much gets it.
Okay.
This one's pretty cool, actually. If you look at the back, I've never done a prototype with the X serial number.
Yeah.
So I made myself the X out of 100 because we only made 100 of these,
Right.
limited edition. So this one's the actual prototype with that X out of 100 case back, and it's the only Weiss watch that ever had that. And I actually gave my dad the number 1 for his 70th birthday.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a cool little thing for me.
Very cool present for Dad. Very cool thing for you.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the next piece. What do we got?
This one is an oddball, and I think most people will be confused as to why I have a quartz watch in my collection. But I do enjoy a good quartz watch,
Okay.
and I think this is one of the best quartz watches around.
So I kind of want to set people up because I think when they finally see it, they're going to be like, okay, what?
It's a gigantic
Okay.
watch that is coated black,
Right.
and it's a Breitling.
Okay.
With digital display, like a digital analog display. It's not something you would expect a watchmaker who makes mechanical watches to be wearing. But the amazing thing about this watch is actually the super quartz that goes into it. It's not just a regular quartz. Only somebody who's nerdy about watches is going to be excited about a super
Right.
quartz, And the super quartz is cool because it has temperature compensation, which, if you really dig into it, is quite important in a quartz watch.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and do the reveal here, the visual reveal at least. So here it is, ladies and gentlemen, a big piece of kit. It's a
Yes.
very how big is this watch? It's 44?
I believe it's I don't think it's 44. I think it's 43.
It looks much bigger than 40.
No, it is. Maybe it is bigger. Maybe it's 46.
Yeah.
Might be
it
46.
looks real
It's a
big.
huge watch.
Well, for comparison,
Yeah.
we might not want to spoil it, but I guess we'll spoil it. So here's a 43 millimeter Zenith. So let's see if we can do a side by side here.
I don't even know if they'll both fit.
Yeah,
There
it
we go.
looks 44-ish. 44-ish, I guess.
Yeah, I forget the exact size.
Okay.
But this is the super quartz in there, so digital analog.
All right,
And
let's,
if I
let's
hit
give
the
the
button-
spotlight back to it. Let's get that Zenith out of the way. We'll bring that back a little bit later. All right, so continue.
So I just hit the crown there, and it's actually a button. The crown acts as a button, so you can activate the screen on that little digital display. You've got 2 of them, one up top, one down below.
Okay.
And then you can actually just rotate. It spins in this position to change what you're looking at. So now I'm at the alarm. It has a whole bunch of functions. It's supposed to be like one turn with your fingers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we got date, and I have it in French up there.
Nice. Multicultural.
Chronograph. You got a countdown timer. You've got a second time, and then you've also got a second alarm. Obviously universal. And then this is just if you want your watch to chime. So you can have it give you a tone every whatever period you want to select. So if you needed to have it chime every hour or whatnot, you could do that. But a lot going on this.
Yeah, quite a lot going on.
Big
rotating
bezel
too. Holy crap.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Forget your complicated VCs and Pateks. This is the most complicated watch that I've had in a very long time, or I've looked at in a very long time.
Right? This is the
more complicated.
Most complicated watch that I own right there. And it's quartz, but super quartz. And super quartz just means it's actually a certified chronometer.
Right.
But the super quartz has a few additional things added to the quartz movement that allow you to not only regulate the quartz movement, which a quartz watch cannot be regulated. You do not regulate a quartz movement. You can regulate a super quartz movement.
Interesting. How so? Explain the process to all of us nerds.
So a quartz crystal is a certain size, or it's supposed to be a certain size.
Okay.
The quartz crystal that's in the watch. You run a current through it, which is why you need a battery or a capacitor of some sort, and then it will oscillate at a set frequency. Mm-hmm. You're trying to achieve a certain frequency for the internal computer, which is then going to operate an electromagnetic motor, which is how you get that ticking motion.
Okay.
The quartz will never be exactly the right size, so you have this IC unit that you can essentially set so that you have the right rate being displayed on the hands.
Okay.
But that's set at the factory, and it's done. There's no fixing that. There's no changing that. So if something's wrong, you throw it away, and you grab the next movement, and you put it in the watch. With this particular watch, because of the super quartz, you can actually alter that. So if I was wearing it, and I found that, you know what, I'm not getting that, 1 second a year accuracy that I really want, I'm going to take it upon myself to try and regulate this a little bit more. And there's a little dial in there, and you can do some regulation, but it's not the most practical because it's such a small increment of time that you're trying to regulate.
Sure.
But it's there. So as a watchmaker, I'm just excited that it's there. That's a cool thing for me. But a big thing with quartz is the temperature compensation. A regular quartz watch has no temperature compensation.
Okay.
So when you go into a cold environment, say I was wearing this outside skiing.
Okay.
Outside of my coat.
Right.
Typically your watch is going to be on your skin and it's going to stay body temperature, so no problem. It's always going to remain body temperature. If you wore it outside of a jacket and you're skiing, or maybe in an airplane that's not pressurized, a small jet, I don't know if it gets cold. I'm not a pilot, but I'm sure there's some kind of temperature issues.
Sure.
This one, not on your skin, will still tell good time because in a cold environment, your watch is going to slow down.
Right.
In a hot environment, it can actually speed up.
Okay.
So this has temperature compensation to fix that deviation.
Okay. Now you're talking about both mechanical and quartz watches where they'll speed up and slow down, or specifically with quartz?
So specifically with quartz, it's going to happen more. Mm-hmm. It does happen with a mechanical watch as well.
Sure. Yeah. Things expand and contract.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool. Someone actually asked me about that recently, and there's a company called Zinn, SINN,
right?
And they actually formulated some special oils that they put in certain watches that they're supposed to be better in cold environments and kind of eliminate that issue a little bit.
Okay.
But it's more like when you're out in negative 10 degrees, your watch is going to be fine, but once you're in negative 12 degrees, it's going to start slowing down, and negative 13.
Okay.
It's going to, so it's a pretty quick drop off when it gets there. But
so if you live in Chicago, go buy a Zinn.
or temperature compensated quartz.
Or one of these, right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I like this. This is getting real geeky, and this is This is right up my alley. So you want to keep going about this watch? You got more to tell us about it, or what should we do?
No, I think that's about it. I mean, you see, the reason I picked this style, I like it's got that green canvas, obviously.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of that. That's how I started my brand, was with the green canvas and a black dial.
Okay.
So that's why I have this particular version.
Yeah, very utilitarian, this watch.
Yeah.
And also kind of a weapon.
Yeah, if you're in a bind, you could definitely take it off and hit somebody over the head. You might knock them out.
Yeah. Do that. You could kind of tie it to a rope and then use it as a hook for climbing.
Yeah, if you're you need a boat anchor or something, this should secure your vessel.
Right. It's weird that James Bond uses an Omega rather than that Breitling.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I guess that wouldn't really work with his suit, so.
Yeah, I don't think it would fit under the cuff.
Right.
On the other hand, this one.
All right.
Would be perfect.
That would be perfect. 38 millimeters.
38 millimeter.
Okay.
So we actually made a sized down field watch.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always 42, like the titanium I had earlier. That's 42. This one is 38. Still manually wound with a display back, and this one's mine.
Beautiful. Number 3.
Number 3.
What made you choose number 3?
Number 3 is my favorite number.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. Okay.
So I have a few other Weiss watches that are the number 3s as well.
Okay. Number 7 and 17 are my 2 favorite. Can I get one?
Yeah. You can go on our website, and we accept credit cards.
Okay. I thought I was going to be able to kind of squeeze my way into like an endorsement ambassador type of deal.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see.
I got to do my best here on this podcast.
Right.
Really get some free stuff, I guess. All right.
That the 38 you can see with that Breitling.
Yeah.
Popping in there.
They're very, very similar. And what I mean by that is they're not very similar.
Right. Not with the size at all.
Right.
But I don't know. I think for me, honestly, I like watches that are between 38 and 42 is my sweet spot. So this Breitling is a bit of an outlier.
Sure.
But I still really like it for other reasons. And I can wear a bigger watch. I've had bigger watches and no problem with it. But I find switching between that guy and this 38 it takes a little getting used to.
Yeah. Well, I think most people, 36 is, for the average sized human, let's say for the average sized American, 36 is probably on the lower end. Like, that's the smaller sized watch. Although we have a 34 that's coming up very, very shortly, but I also have very small wrists. So
yeah, 34 that's a tiny watch.
Yeah, that's quite little.
In the vintage world, like, if I'm getting a vintage watch, I look for the 38s. Okay. They're a little rarer.
Yeah.
And usually they're a bit more money, but I can actually wear it. If I go below a 38, I don't feel comfortable wearing it. It feels a little too delicate. But, of course, anything in that 34 to 36 range, I would probably buy for my wife immediately.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right, so what's next?
Talking about sizes in watches, this is actually a good segue to this watch here.
All right.
This is an older Blancpain, and it's a 50 fathoms, but not the diving version. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have your typical 60-minute diving bezel.
Okay.
It's actually a GMT version.
Interesting.
So there was a period of time where they made these. It was this trilogy, they called it, and it was like air, sea, and land.
Right.
I think it was air, sea, land. And so you had the sea one was your typical, what you'd think of as a 50 fathoms with your dive bezel. The sea, that was the sea. The land was a chronograph. They made a chronograph version. And then the air was this GMT version.
Okay.
So they had these 3 versions, and this particular one is, I believe, from the, I don't remember, maybe early 2000s. Yeah, early 2000s, I believe. But it's a nice size.
Okay.
It's like a 39 millimeter or 40 millimeter watch.
Okay. Let's compare it to something on the smaller end and then on the bigger end. We'll see kind of how it goes.
So like next to a 38.
Right.
It doesn't look huge.
It doesn't.
which a lot of the 50 Fathom stuff and the Blancpain stuff right now, it's been growing, and it's been a long time since they had 50 Fathoms in what I would consider a reasonable size. It's been more like the 47s and stuff like that for the 50 Fathoms. So to have this, a nice size, and also an amazing movement. This has a very special movement in it. Blancpain's been using it for a long time. They still use it. But it's a movement you're going to find in Vacheron watches.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see it in Patek, Audemars. So this is a really nice movement that is in here.
What is the movement?
This, I believe, is the 11. It's a Frederic Piguet, and I'm blanking on the caliber number right now. But Blancpain obviously has their own caliber number for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, this one's 1 digit off because it has the GMT added to it. So it's like add a 1 at the end.
Okay.
For them. But this particular caliber, not made by Blancpain,
Mm-hmm.
which is why it's shared between multiple brands. It'll be different decoration and things like that. But solid movement that you will find in today, watches made today that are $30,000.
Wow.
So
It's a shame that you can't see it. It's not a display back, is it?
no, not a display
it's
back.
not.
This was before the whole display back craze. People weren't as interested in seeing the movements.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a solid movement. But something really cool about like Blancpain from its earlier days, when it was just restarted, the quantities were much lower as far as production goes. When they really were new, Jean-Claude was flying out to the U.S. to deliver watches.
Wow.
Yeah, at least the complicated ones.
Okay.
He was meeting clients in person. So it was a really interesting restart for that company. And it was him and a friend who, his family was in the watch movement manufacturing business.
Mm-hmm.
And JCB had the opportunity to buy the brand name and got a very good price for it. Created a wonderful line of watches, and eventually made a very successful company. Sold it to Swatch Group for a
lot of money. Yeah, he's not doing poorly.
Yeah, it was way more money than he
that.
purchased the name for. But of course, lots and lots of sweat equity went into that.
Sure. Yeah.
But another thing I really love about this watch is this bracelet, actually.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at the bracelet. So let's squeeze in a little bit higher there. Here we go. All right.
It might be a little hard to see on the screen here, but these links,
Mm-hmm.
the center links, are actually rounded on the inside
Okay. Yep.
and rounded on the outside,
Yep.
which makes for a very comfortable bracelet. Instead of the what you'd be used to on like your Rolex bracelets,
Mm-hmm.
instead of, gosh, it's really hard to see that, huh?
Yeah.
Can
it
you
is.
even tell?
I think you could tell a little bit.
Yeah, so instead of going with the form of your wrist,
On the inside here.
it actually goes
Whoops.
the opposite direction. So the link is convex, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, convex on the interior side. So that actually means that it touches less of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite a bit more comfortable, especially when it's hot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you take a look at this watch as just a watch, right? Excuse me. The finishing on it is far and beyond watches that are supposed to be kind of in the same category. Like let's take, for example, a GMT Rolex, like a regular sub or something. You're not going to see the level of finishing on a Rolex that is the level of finishing on a Blancpain, because you could really, you have to see one of these in person to really appreciate it. Like the case itself, look at the design on the case. Look at the
Where it rounds out and then
shapes here.
goes into the lugs. Yeah.
Yep. It's
Right.
just, and the way that the crown extends here is pretty amazing. It's kind of a difficult shot because it's very reflective, but you guys probably won't see too many of these. That's kind of the bummer, is you don't see too many Blancpains in the wild, as I like to say.
Yeah, and I really like stuff from that like late 90s and early 2000s, I guess, that kind of era for Swiss watchmaking, I think is wildly undervalued. There's some really great deals to be had. Like the amount of money spent on producing this watch is far greater than what they spend today on producing Swiss watches. A modern Swiss watch, a lot more things will have been engineered out of it to keep the cost lower.
What do you mean? What kind of things?
Things like these lugs. Look at the modern 50 Fathoms.
Yep.
It's a very different case shape, and
You're
there's
right.
a good reason for that.
Right.
It can be machined in a different way, whereas this was made a little more in the traditional way from a much earlier time. And I'm not saying all companies have engineered these things out of it, but in order to keep the cost low, because wages are rising substantially, that's one thing that you will see in modern day watches is a lot of engineering took place to make it so that you can machine that part in one operation on a CNC machine.
Yep.
Whereas some of these watches from the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, you're just going to have a really different design that today, if you tried to replicate it, would make for a far more expensive watch.
Yeah, and time is money, no pun intended.
Yeah.
So they have businesses to run and profit margins to maintain. So obviously they're going to do what they need to do. And that's why we're seeing what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I like that time because also a lot of people aren't looking at it. So those watches are quite a bit less money than buying a modern watch or what would be considered a vintage watch. It's kind of in between vintage and modern right now. So
some advice, I guess, what we can give here is if you really want a lot of bang for your buck, Blancpain.
yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so Crown and Caliber, plenty of Blancpains on their site. So if you go, take a look and see which ones you like. You're not going to be disappointed. It may not be your aesthetic taste, but if you were looking for just the full package of quality, Blancpain.
Yeah, and I do also gravitate towards that the 90s because of the tritium dials too.
Yeah.
I like that little bit of extra patina on the tritium dials, even though they won't glow anymore. Like with these, I don't know if our camera's just white balancing this out, but
It looks
you
a little yellower.
See the numerals. Yeah, the numerals are a little bit yellower. The hands are new on this one, so the hands have super luminova.
Yeah, you can see the
they're a
difference
bit
of
brighter.
the white. Yeah. It's funny. You and I are complete opposites. I can't stand patina. Like one of the watches that we're going to bring up that is one of my favorite watches of all time is starting to patina, and it's really upsetting.
Oh boy, you'll have to sell me that one, and I'll get you a new one.
Well, I can't do that, and I'll explain why I can't do that later on in the show. But maybe I could find one that is patinaing, and then we can work something out, especially for the 38 millimeter right there. That's
right.
kind of pulling me in, I guess you could say. Okay, so we've got the fourth watch here, and it looks like there aren't any other watches on the table from you.
Yeah,
so.
that's everything new that came into my collection over the past, I guess 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't buy many watches, and when I do, a lot of thought goes into it.
Sure. Yeah, okay, so I have a question for you. So you're a watchmaker. You make your own watches, right? Do you eventually kind of get tired of them? Because I know plenty of people, for example, like mechanics, right? They hate cars because they work on cars, so they don't want to do anything with cars. They don't want to drive them, race them, with the exception of like a few really, really hardcore dudes that just go into cars because that's their obsession. But someone who goes into the field of watchmaking, like you, for example, do you still have all that enthusiasm? You're obviously doing a watch podcast and you're still maintaining your business, so what is it?
I still have all that enthusiasm. I could barely say enthusiasm.
Well,
I still have
the show's been off for a
the
little
enthusiasm, but one thing that has changed is definitely what interests me in watches. That has morphed substantially from when I first got into watches. I don't care so much about like what is very popular, and I've become even less interested in what is getting more popular, as you can see kind of by the choices of watches I have out here.
Sure.
The vintage Rolex I have was from far, far before vintage was popular, and it was just something that was going to be thrown away basically because it was worthless. And I brought it back to life, and I enjoy it. But now I find it hard to wear because too many people notice it,
Yeah.
and it's become too expensive to me to actually wear. It seems too precious.
Sure.
And so many people are looking for those watches. Not that they're bad watches or anything. I personally I find it hard to wear now because of how valuable they've become.
Well, I mean, it's very nice. You've got an appreciating asset.
Yeah.
Not very often you see that, especially in
Right.
watches. Don't invest in watches, people. Buy them, enjoy them, have a great time with them, resell them, do whatever it is that you please. But watches, for the most part, are not an investment.
No, if it brings a smile to your face, that's what's important.
Exactly.
Every watch that I have brings a smile to my face when I put it on. Sometimes I'll rotate through watches in one day and just smile at each one.
In one day, okay. Well, do they smile back?
Yeah,
Bad
sometimes
joke.
at 10:10. At
Real
10:10 they
joke.
smile back.
Real bad joke. But yeah, that was a 10-10 joke. But okay. All right, moving on because it's going to get real cheesy if we continue to do that. But and we don't want to do that. So are we done with the Blancpain?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I guess that kind of signals that we should look at some of the stuff that I brought, right?
Yeah, let's see your collection.
Okay.
Or
Well,
some of your collection, I guess.
disclaimer, I'm not a collector.
You don't have to be.
I agree. I do have a few watches, but I don't like a lot of stuff. I don't want to open up a drawer and have to decide and have to sit there and kind of contemplate which one is going to be best for whatever. I have a couple of watches that suit me for a couple of different occasions, and that's pretty much it. That's as far as it goes. And usually the way my philosophy is if I want a different watch, I either trade up or I sell the watch and I wait for something that comes around that I really like. Usually it's not, volume for me is not something that does it for me because there are way too many watches and way too much money to spend, and it'll get me in way too much trouble. So I try to control myself and my spending with regard to that. So with that being said, I guess instead of talking about monetary value, we can talk about something that is sentimental value. So this is something that pretty much started everything for me. This is a Soviet. Oh, that's getting washed out quite a bit because of it, but that's okay.
Dead exposure down.
There we go. There we go. It's not like it's a very high quality watch to begin with because it's made in the Soviet Union, so it is as utilitarian as it gets. But this watch was passed down to me by my great-grandfather. And this is pretty much what started it all. So my great-grandfather, he went through the war, he went through all the suffering of the Soviet Union, and this watch was in his pocket at all times. Completely original. Nothing has ever been done to it. I don't think it's ever even been serviced because the mainspring just broke. So I'm not super happy about that. We'll get that fixed. But yeah, this is a Molniya watch, which translates to translates to lightning. So Molniya means lightning in Russian. And this, for some strange reason, kind of sparked everything for me. I don't know why. I had no idea what it was when it was given to me. I was very, very little, probably 5, 6 years old. And this watch was actually in my parents' drawer for the longest time. And when I got a little bit older, they gave it to me and said, hey, this was passed down to you by your great-grandfather. And then something happened. There was like a spark. And when I was like 7 or 8 years old I was 7 when we came to America. And at like 9, all I wanted was watches. When my parents would go, hey, what do you want for your birthday? I'd go, see that Citizen right there in the drawer at Sears or wherever? Sears was our jam. Back in the 90s, Sears was our jam. Please get me that watch. And that's what I had. Was a bunch of different Seikos, a bunch of different Citizens, a lot of Japanese stuff. So, yeah, this is a Molniya. There's really not a lot to say about it with the with the exception of like this watch made in the Soviet Union has Breguet numerals, which is pretty cool. And that's kind of the coolest thing about it. And obviously the story of it being in my great-grandfather's pocket for years and years and years is really cool. And this is one that doesn't have any monetary value, but it has a lot of sentimental value to me. So that's the first one. The second one, again, is a sentimental piece, but it's actually one of my favorite watches of all time. And this one's got a great story, too. So my brother and I we're very competitive with each other, but in a very good way, where we like to buy each other stuff for our birthdays and to see who kind of got more creative or has a better gift or something of that sort. It's just friendly competition. And when I was 21, I started my first business, and I was completely broke. I had no money for several years until the business took off. And I kind of was, this is at the time where the internet and watches on the internet were like becoming a real thing. So I was going through a bunch of different websites and different retailers. Unfortunately, Crown and Caliber wasn't around back then, but we won't cry over that, I guess. But yeah, I was looking at this watch online, and my brother goes, "Hey, what are you looking at over there?" And it was this watch. And for my birthday, he actually ended up buying me this watch, and he surprised me with this watch. The box of this watch, and inside was Casio calculator watch. So we had this party for me, and he got this, obviously the IWC box. And I opened it up, and there was a Casio watch in there. But then he eventually gave me the watch after he played that cruel joke on me. So this is Mark 16, IWC, 39 millimeter. In my opinion, one of the, if not the most comfortable watches to wear for my wrist size, because it is perfect. The lugs are done in such a way, and the case is done in such a way where it just blends in with you. Because if you take a look at it, it's not a very thick watch. It's actually, I don't know the sizes on it, but we can look it up and we can post it later. And the lugs themselves, they've got this kind of swoop, right? The regular swoop that most watches have. But this particular one, for some reason, is a lot more comfortable. And it's got the cool case back where you've got the Flieger inscription on it and the years of wear and abuse, obviously, on it as well. It's in desperate need of a service. It does have, I do believe, a 28. What do you think is the base on this? 2892, maybe? 2894? It's an at a base.
Yeah, I think either a 2824 or a 2892.
Okay. It is. Does have that little. What is it? A brass piece on the inside for anti-magnetism?
No, so you'd have it's an iron shield.
Iron shield, that's what it is.
So when you actually open the case back, there's another case back inside.
Right.
That is it's sitting in there sandwiched between the case back and the case, and it just shields the movement so that your stainless steel case back, it provides extra shielding because the stainless steel won't actually interfere that much with a magnet.
Right. Okay. All right, which is a very high probability if you're in aviation. This is a pilot's watch, so
yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah, or if you're like today, honestly, doctors.
Yeah.
I find that a lot of people who are working with like X-ray equipment and in hospitals and things like that, they contact me the most about why is my watch off so much? Like all of a sudden it's just like 5 minutes an hour. It's just crazy. Yeah. And it's magnetism.
Well, CT scans, MRI machines, they're all big magnets.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's your answer. So doctors, go on Crown and Caliber. This is my first episode, so I'm really excited. So a lot of Crown and Caliber mentioning. They hired me, so I'm super stoked. So yeah, you could find a bunch of IWCs on that website as well.
And even if you find that you're magnetizing your watch a lot, I would recommend just buying a demagnetizer. It's so simple. You go on like Amazon.com, get a demagnetizer. You literally place the watch on it, hit a button, scrambles up the magnetism. You're good to go. You might have to hit the button a few times. There's some really cheap demagnetizers that probably don't work as well, but you could spend like $25, $30 for a demagnetizer and it'll work just fine. Okay. All right. Go on Amazon, get your demagnetizer. Done. Or get a watch that has that kind of a case back. Yeah. All right. Next watch in the very, very light collection. So this is what we were talking about slightly earlier with being on the smaller end. This is a 34 millimeter. Let's get the exposure up a little bit. It's a 15200 Rolex date. So it's not a date just, it's a Rolex date with the stick indices. This is a small watch. It's a very small watch. But it works for me because my wrist size isn't very large. Do you know what year this was? It's probably 90s because it does have the quick set. Okay. Yeah. The previous versions did not have the quick set, which is not what I wanted, and that's why I didn't get it. So the 34, this was marketed towards women then at that time, right? Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. I believe so.
maybe.
Or were they still with the tiny little one that nobody wants now? The little
No, they had the tiny little
28
ones.
yeah.
Yeah, they had the tiny ones. I think this was probably marketed towards men.
Yeah.
But we're talking about a watch. When was the initial design of this thing? Probably late 70s. Late 70s?
The initial design?
Well, of the date, or the date just the. Yeah,
I mean, it's all the oyster
right,
case.
The oyster case. There you go.
So I mean, you're talking about a very old design, and
60s.
yes, they started out very small.
Right. Yeah. So same case, same design, just a different, more updated movement.
Yeah.
Which, in my opinion, is the most satisfying movement for me to wind because it is a very distinct clicking sound. Some of the other watches that we have and we've discussed, they wind, obviously, thank God. But they don't have that satisfying kind of like click, click, click. Some of them are very buttery and very smooth, but this one has a very mechanical feel to it, which is very, very satisfying.
Yeah.
And this watch is built pretty much bulletproof. I've worn it for several years, and there are not many scratches on it in comparison to the IWC, which makes you think that it's probably a little bit more robust in terms of materials. Maybe I'm off. Maybe I'm right.
Could be the size, though, too.
Could be the size.
Smaller watches, less likely to get whacked on something.
Yep, that's a possibility.
Hey, Watch and Listen fans, a quick interruption to tell you about another amazing giveaway by Crown and Caliber. This time they're giving away the iconic Rolex Submariner 16610 with an estimated value of over $7,300. Here's how you enter. Go to youtube.com/user/Crown and Caliber. The sweepstake video will be under the Home tab. Click Read More, watch the video for some awesome B-roll on the actual watch, and then click the link to enter. Follow the instructions on the Crown and Caliber site, and you're good to go. Good luck. Now back to the show.
All right, so we've discussed the 15200 date. Let's go on to the last watch that I own. And this, my friends, is what happens when you go out drinking in Las Vegas during JCK. The Swatch System 51. And I got it when there was the whole System 51 craze. At least kind of between the collectors that I was friends with, everybody wanted a System 51 to the point where people were reselling them for more money than they were actually worth. So that was
which is wild
crazy.
Because the whole point of System 51 was to include no people in the manufacture and to mass produce a plastic automatic watch, essentially.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But it is a cool watch, and don't drink and buy watches, people. It's a very bad idea. Although I think I kind of did okay, because I've heard some real horror stories with people buying watches while they were inebriated. So I think that the $200 purchase that I had in whatever hotel it was that I was staying at, I don't even remember. I think I did okay. But this is pretty cool, and I really actually did want this watch, and the reason that I did want this watch is because it's kind of cool. I mean, it's kind of cool because it's hermetically sealed. Is that the right way to?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to describe it. It's Swatch. For those that don't know the whole engineering idea behind Swatch, I'll just say real quickly, they basically take a movement and they stick it inside of a case. Mm-hmm. They glue everything together tightly. So you're not supposed to ever open up a Swatch watch. None of them. They're never supposed to be serviced.
Okay.
On the quartz ones, they have a little tiny spot where you can open it with a quarter or a nickel. You can open up the battery compartment, and that is it. You are not supposed to do anything other than open the battery compartment on those ones.
Okay.
And replace the battery. If it doesn't work after you replace the battery, then you throw the watch away. That's the whole design, just to make it as inexpensive as possible. And so with this automatic movement, it's an automatic movement, but it's not ever meant to be serviced.
Right.
The parts are made completely on machines. There's not really any hand interaction going on with this watch, but you can see there's an oscillating weight that's hidden out here.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't look like an automatic watch because you don't see the weight, but when you move it a little bit, you can kind of see it spin, that outer area.
Yep.
And then you've got your barrel, your gear train, and your escapement over here, balance wheel. But it's kind of hidden in this cool, almost like a toy-like fashion.
Yeah.
Inside of a blue plastic watch.
Yeah. a see-through
Yeah.
blue plastic watch,
Right?
which is the coolest part, I think, in my opinion. If you flip it on the opposite side of the crown, you can actually see through the case there, and when you are wearing it, and if it's sunny enough outside, you could see the oscillating weight.
You see the balance wheel
You could see
going back and forth,
You can
right?
see the balance wheels. It's kind of difficult to see, but the oscillating
Just
weight,
the weight,
you can actually
okay.
see. Yeah, maybe we can kind of. Let's see if we can spin it real quick. Whoops.
Nah.
Yeah, it's not going to work. It's a little too dark here in the workshop, but you can see it, and it is pretty cool. So
Yeah.
if you guys really want a fun toy, like this is a toy.
Yeah, now there's a lot more designs for the Systems 51. Back then when they first came out with it, it was like, this is the one thing we're making on our assembly line, and that's that. But now they have quite a lot of different versions that you can get.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, System 51, a lot of fun for not a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it is kind of a conversation starter, actually. I've had a lot of people who are watch collectors, and I'm talking about watch collectors of a caliber that I am nowhere near. People that daily wear like 5070s, Patek 5070s, and that's kind of like their daily wear. Come to me and say, "Hey, where'd you get that?"
Yeah, and if you think about it, I mean, there was, I think in every watch enthusiast's life, they go through a time where they're very anti-quartz because there was a competition between quartz and mechanical, and quartz could have put mechanical watches out of business completely.
It almost did.
It almost happened where we almost had no more mechanical watches.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a hate for quartz. So I think that's why some serious watch collectors end up with a Systems 51, because instead of getting a cheap quartz watch as like a beater watch, that you don't have to care about, and if something goes wrong, you can just toss it, you can get a mechanical watch in that same price range and not have to have any quartz watches in your collection.
Right.
You don't have to deal with that weird relationship with a quartz watch. Even though I'm at the point where I love certain quartz watches now, most quartz watches I don't find too interesting.
Right. Look, if you really like the way that it looks, and if you really like the way that it makes you feel, go for it. As long as you can afford it. If you don't put yourself into major debt purchasing it, then why not, right?
Yeah.
And there are so many different agreements and disagreements in the watch world that I kind of go just with the flow.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of watches and of a gentleman that kind of sort of saved, he didn't really save the Swiss watchmaking industry, but he saved this particular movement, and it's the El Primero. So we'll jump into this. This is not my watch. This is a watch that I bought for my brother. So talking competition, remember? So he bought me the IWC. I bought him this El Primero. He wanted to purchase this watch for himself after he passed the bar and got his first job. Well, I bought him this watch when he graduated law school, so I beat him a few years. And then actually, when he was taking his bar, it helped him a lot. He actually used the chronograph. So he was timing himself in different sections of the California bar with this watch. What this is a Charles Vermont. Is that the right pronunciation? Probably. Vermot.
Yeah, don't ask me. I'm not good at pronunciation.
Fair. That guy that saved the plans and a lot of the machinery, stowed it away in Zenith at the time of the quartz crisis, and he was pretty much, I guess, it's a tribute to him, right? It's a tribute to Charles Vermont. We could say that safely.
This watch or
the line of watches. So basically, the blue dial Zeniths, they're the elites, I believe. There's a Charles Vermont series, and then the series of these as well. There are quite a few of them, but anyway, it's the blue dial that is going to tell you if it's a Charles Vermont. It's a limited edition piece, and you can see that it's. Let's get.
Yeah, we got to see that movement.
Let's go back to this shot.
The El Primero movement is so. For those that don't know, the El Primero is a high beat chronograph. For today, it's not like a wildly high beat, but back when it was produced, it was a wildly high beat. It was such a high beat that the oils on the escapement would not stay in place. So they had major problems when they first started producing this movement, keeping the oil on the pallet fork because of how fast everything was moving. So
yeah, you can really see the balance going.
Yeah.
Take a look at that.
It was far before many of the high beat watches that you think of today, where I mean, there's watches that are 100,000 beats per hour, or per minute or whatever. It's crazy fast. This one's 36
36.6, I think.
6, right?
Yeah. What is that in hertz? 5 hertz?
I don't really do hertz.
Okay.
Something
Scratch
fast.
that. Something
Yeah,
fast.
I don't really think in hertz. Sometimes, what's weird to me is that sometimes the companies will market things in hertz, but as a watchmaker, we're never like looking at something in hertz. All of our equipment is doing it with your beat rate, but we're not looking at anything in hertz. So I don't really think in hertz, but obviously you can do the
math.
the equation exactly,
Right.
and switch out to hertz.
Yeah, I'll pass.
Yeah.
I'll just say 5 hertz, 6 hertz, whatever it is. 36.6 vibrations per hour. It is very cool because the difference really between high beat movements and standard 28.8 movements is if you fire off the chronograph, the sweeping hand is a lot smoother. So what do we have here?
Yeah, you have put up that one.
It's hard to tell, and it might be difficult to tell, especially because the resolution probably won't allow it. But if you take a look at the seconds hand here, the seconds register, where's that little stick? There it is. So if you take a look at
and it's way smoother than
right
the beat rate on this guy right here.
Well, that's a quartz, right?
Well,
or hacking seconds.
Yeah, this one's hacking seconds, but the oscillations of the quartz crystal are going to be fast.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, but you could tell, like, the Rolex, it has a very nice sweep. And I don't know, I heard a long time ago that the sweep kind of indicates the quality of the watch.
So this was, again, that was back when people were trying to achieve a higher beat rate. And a higher beat rate means that you're breaking time down into smaller increments. So a higher beat rate can potentially lead to a more accurate watch. Doesn't mean your watch is going to be more accurate if it has a higher beat rate, but if it's regulated properly and everything is done to the highest level, then yes, you could potentially make that watch more accurate. So if you had a perfect watch and it was 18,000 beats per hour, that's a traditional, like, you'll see that with your tourbillons. Very traditional, but it's slow. So if you speed that up, you're breaking it down into smaller portions of time. So take a perfect slow beat movement that's absolutely flawless, increase the rate, and then all things being equal, you can have a more accurate watch.
Okay, so can.
Yeah. Doesn't mean more accurate.
Right, it's not a guarantee.
Kind of like there was also a time when more jewels in a watch.
Sure, I remember that. 30 joules.
Was conceived as a better watch.
Right.
And that came from a time period where there were watches with no jewels, actually. They were just not putting jewels in watches because it was too expensive. It was before we had synthetic sapphire, which is ground into the jewels in modern watches. So back then they would have to purchase rubies and hand cut the rubies into the jewels.
That does sound expensive.
So only very fancy watches had rubies.
Right.
For a certain period of time when rubies were scarce, and before the scientific evolution of growing sapphire crystals came along. So there's this time period where more jewels were made for a better watch. And same thing with these watches, you would think higher beat rate, nicer sweep of the second hand.
Sure.
So obviously the smoother the second hand is sweeping across the dial should mean a nicer watch.
Right. If you want real smooth, Seiko spring drive. That's very smooth.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to see any jitter in that sweep at all.
Yeah. I love it when I saw like cheaper watches that, like Sears, for example, that said 9 rubies or 12 rubies. I'm like, there are no rubies in those watches.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to the watches here. So, yes, the Charles Verma limited edition watch, I think, is like 5 something. Well, we won't go into those details because it's unnecessary. But this watch belongs to my brother. It's his only watch with the exception of a Seiko that I did buy him just kind of as a fun watch. This is his daily wear, and you can tell because it is also pretty beat up. But he does take pretty good care of it, so I'm happy with that. It's an interesting watch, and here's why. The original A series, right? What was the serial on those, or the model numbers? A 380 or something like that? The original El Primeros that came out in '69 with this exact look. We'll look that up later. Anyway, the movement on this is not so large in comparison to the case, and the dial is very, very large. So one of my least favorite things about this watch is the space in between the chronograph registers and the sides here. And I think that's just like an aesthetic opinion. This watch is one of my favorites, period.
So you prefer less space or
yes,
more space?
Less space, because I
space.
think its symmetry is important to me, and I think the less space is more symmetrical on the vintage watches. But again, it's a matter of preference, so it doesn't really matter. But one of the really cool things about this watch and Zenith's line of these watches is the raised crystal. So if you take a look at the side profile, that crystal is just magical. Super cool. You don't see a lot of these types of crystals on modern watches. And again, the case is very well designed, very cool sweep to it. Also, a pretty comfortable watch. It wears its size. It wears as a 43 millimeter watch. So yeah, I've got it on this NATO right now, and I borrowed it from him. I've worn it a few times. Pretty comfortable, especially on the NATO strap, which is, I think, like NATOs are the most comfortable. They're just so incredibly comfortable. But yeah, he enjoys it, and I enjoy it sometimes, and we swap watches. So that's the El Primero Zenith. So let's go into the next piece, and well, I guess we'll wrap on that because it's legitimately the last piece. Let's open up the bracelet on this. So this is actually my mom's watch. So I stole my parents' watches and my brother's watch to bring here.
Does that count? You're bringing in your mom's watch?
It does count, and I'll explain to you why. Because this watch actually brought me back into watches. So I kind of lost the whole watch thing for a little bit because I kind of got bored. I was really young, and I didn't really look at watches the way that like a mature person, or at least someone who's really into the watchmaking hobby and watch collecting hobby was looking into them. I kind of looked at the standard Rolexes and Seikos and some Breitlings. Like my favorite watch at that time was a Navitimer, and I kind of didn't go beyond that. It was like the mainstream watches that I really liked, and I kind of, you get bored with the same thing, so I kind of stopped looking at watches for a little bit. And then I saw this. And then I was back. So when I saw the Reverso do the Reverso trick, I was like, wait a minute, there's got to be more to this watch collecting hobby and this watch enthusiast hobby. And it brought me back. And that's when I think at that point in time is when I really became an enthusiast and really became a watch person, like a watch guy. Because that watch kind of allowed me to discover that there was more to watches than just the standard time and the complications. And the complications really kind of became boring too, because you kind of see the same complications across the board. The really, really expensive stuff is not super attainable. And, when you're 19, 20 years old, you're not looking at those watches because, number one, they look like watches an old guy would wear in most cases. And obviously you can't afford $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 as a 19-year-old. But these are fairly affordable. Like this watch, I think is somewhere around the $3,000-$4,000 range. You could pick one up now.
Oh yeah, and this is a small one, but
right.
they have full size Reversos, and the Reverso's pretty cool. It's a watch that they've had and made for a very long time. It was initially for polo,
right?
So you could flip the watch around, and you have the metal back would then be on the front to protect the glass on your watch. Right, and you'll see a lot of them. People engrave that side, or there's now Reversos that have a whole nother mechanism on the other side. It could be a complication added to the movement, or it could be a second movement.
Right. The duos, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So you'll actually have two different watch dials or faces, sides, and you can flip the watch over. But I've loved those watches ever since I discovered them as well. It's just a really cool design, and I think for a rectangular watch, it is one of my favorite rectangular watches for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of rectangular watches, so I'd have to agree. It is my
Right.
favorite rectangular watch.
Yeah, I think it's something to do with the lugs on it and the lines that are at the top of the case
Right.
seem very masculine to me.
Right. Yeah, one of the watches that you can compare the Reversos to is the 1945 by Girard-Perregaux. And I would prefer the JLC because you're right. Those little lines on the top, they kind of
Right.
do make it a little bit more masculine. So, yeah, we're in agreement there. These are really, really great watches, and I think we could do a spotlight on JLC in one of these episodes because they're such a movement powerhouse.
We did one
You
on
did?
JLC, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're interested in the Reverso and the history of it, we dove into that pretty deep on that episode. You can look that one up.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Episode number, do we have one?
Oh, I have
Put it in the
no
show notes?
idea. Yeah, we can put it in
Okay.
the notes.
All right. Well, you should, in any which way, go back to the entire catalog of, I guess, Watch and Listen podcast 1.0. We'll call it that, and this is 2.0. And yeah, just look through it and see what you like and what you don't like, and go on from there.
So I got one more question.
Yeah.
What watch are you thinking about now? Is there a watch on your mind that, that you really are into?
Ah, man, I hate when people do this to me because literally, as you said, like I knew the question before you even finished the sentence, and I'm already thinking of different reference numbers and different watches, and it really depends. Like if you're looking, if it's a sport watch, I really would like to find a Zenith powered Panerai radio mirror. I don't remember the exact model number. I think it's like 187 or 97, something like that.
Seems like
Yeah,
you're better
97.
with reference numbers than I am.
I am terrible with reference numbers, but we do have Google. It's the Zenith powered. I believe it's also an El Primero. It might not be, but I think it is. It's a radio mirror case, and I do believe it's an alarm. I'm not entirely sure, but if you show me the watch, it's not a very popular watch from Panerai, obviously, because they're nowhere really to be found. I think they're kind of rare, and they've been rare for a very long time.
Yeah, even the radio mirror is not that popular to begin with
Right,
for
yeah.
them. I mean, they're all about the Luminor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the sport watch, that would be it. Something dressy would probably be my favorite Patek is a 5070. That's why I mentioned it earlier. Obviously, if I get to play with, I'm not going to ever purchase a Roger Smith because they're quite expensive. But I did have the pleasure of playing around with a Daniels watch by Roger Smith. That was pretty incredible.
That is.
It really it depends. Today's Wednesday, so today's going to have a different answer than tomorrow. But as we talk about watches and as the episodes progress, you'll see what my tastes are with watches. I do have a particular aesthetic kind of classification. I kind of tend to compartmentalize watches. So we'll discuss more of this, I guess, as the episodes go along. But today I'd like a Weiss watch, so we'll talk off the mics.
Yeah.
All right, so this kind of brings us to the conclusion, I guess. We don't have any more watches to discuss.
That's right.
All right, so one thing I do want to say before we wrap up the episode, I do want to thank a couple of people. I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank Crown and Caliber and all the people that are behind the brand, Rachel and Nate, that were working with us here before, kind of in the background to put the show back together, I guess. So thank you very much to both of them. Also to Matt Farah for giving us a studio so that we could test this whole thing out and play with the systems, and he was very gracious to do that. And yeah, so I'm excited. Hopefully I am up to the standards of the Watch and Listen podcast listeners. If you guys have any questions, you can contact me on Instagram or wherever. We'll post all that stuff up. Go to crownandcaliber.com if you're looking for a pre-owned watch or a pre-enjoyed watch. They have an incredible collection. I think I heard something along the lines of 2,500 watches in inventory at one time. Is that? Yes,
I have no idea.
That's a lot of
However, I
watches.
have seen their wall of boxes.
Yes.
All the boxes for all the watches, and I had asked them, like, how do you keep track of all of the watch boxes and all the accessories? And it's just unbelievable to see the logistics behind everything, the watches coming in and servicing and taking care of everything and keeping all the accessories and all the links and everything with all those watches. Not a problem I have with my small collection of watches.
Well, one of these days, right? We'll get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you very much to them. They have an amazing process. If you're looking for a pre-owned or pre-enjoyed watch, go to crownandcaliber.com. Cameron, do you want to plug?
Yeah, hop on weisswatchcompany.com and get your own ultralight. There's only 100 of them, so they're already going pretty quickly. So if you're interested in a titanium ultralight with an aluminum movement, then now's the time. Also, follow me on Instagram, Cameron M. Weiss, and follow Weiss Watch Company on Instagram.
Okay. For me, pretty simple. My Instagram is where you could probably contact me the easiest. I do have my email on there as well. Road Stories Mike, at Road Stories Mike on Instagram. So shoot me a DM if you have any questions. If you want to just talk watches, I'm always up to it. If you want to talk cars, I'm always up to it as well. Yeah, I guess that'll wrap up the first episode of Watch and Listen Podcast 2.0. So, Cameron, thanks for having faith in me. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. Cheers, everyone.